Everyone, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with Pearl, Nikhil, and Mukesh. A very, very warm welcome to all three of you, and especially Mukesh. Thanks for taking time. I know it's a very busy time for everyone at the ministry and the institute. What we want to talk about today, as you all know, since the amendments to the CSR law have happened, a lot of us are looking at how do we kind of take steps to make sure that we are compliant, but at the same time, how do we make sure that we also deliver the impact we have to deliver on the ground? And it's that important balance and doing it together, and that and is very, very important in today's conversation, so that we are able to make sure that we are compliant and we are able to kind of deliver the impact on the ground as well. And we would today focus our discussions around understanding what the changes in the law have been, how they impact all of us in the sector. Two, and that's where Mukesh's guidance would be very, very useful. And I really, when we were preparing for this panel, I really liked what Mukesh said, that today the law is already here. It's come through the changes are here. It's come through a variety of consultations that have happened, and now it's all for all of us together to take it forward from here on. So we will look forward to his guidance and inputs on what has changed and how do we kind of take that forward. We will also hear thoughts from Pearl on how, from a corporate perspective, and given also the work that Ambuja Cement Foundation does on the ground, how they are now looking at the changes and adapting, evolving themselves, to balance both the compliance and the impact. And Nikhil, who's been in the development space, has worn many, many, many different hats. And now, as the chief executive of an NGO doing work on the ground, can also then share his thoughts on what, from an implementation agency point of view, what has changed and how again we need to adapt, from that perspective. So that's going to be the set of discussions. We hope to make it very, very interactive. Please leave your questions, on the chat, or with the Satwa team, and we will definitely bring those questions here. And my request is to bring up questions that hopefully are more generic than very, very specific to your organization, so that everybody can benefit from that. With that, Mukesh, would love to invite you now. There's been a fantastic evolution of the law over the last few years. I also, as a global development sector, when we interact, and at Satva we get to interact with a lot of people across the world from the development perspective, and we feel very proud about the fact that India has a CSR law, and we actually do it in a way that's a lot more structured. And we consult and advise a lot of international companies across different sectors. And what we interestingly also hear from many companies is that the budgets that their Indian counterparts get to spend is far more predictable, higher, because of the law. So clearly, I think we kind of changed the game when the law came into effect a few years ago, and things have evolved since then, and now we're at a very, very critical junction as well with these changes. So it'll be great to hear, Mukesh, on how the law has evolved, and at this particular juncture with these amendments, what are some of the key changes that we should note?
नहीं मेरे पास है यार. हम्म.
Request
First of
everybody again
all,
to please
thank
go
you.
on mute and keep your cameras off as well. Thank you. Over to you, Mukesh.
So thanks, Krishna and the support team for having me here, and all the panelists, those who are already accomplished leaders in their field, and also the participants. I'm sure you must have had a variety of experience of where the CSR law has evolved and how much water has flown under the bridge since this was introduced some 7 years ago, close to 7 years ago. And so the first set of rules were in 27th February 2014, if I from there, a lot of changes have happened, and we had our share of learning from both positive as well as negative learning of these things first. But what is more important is to know that we have together corporate sector, the government, the implementing agencies, consulting organizations, and other stakeholders who are part of the system have actually learned it together. This is what is our collective wisdom.
Mukesh sir, if you can just come a little closer to the mic, it'll be better. I think we are losing you once in a while.
Am I audible now?
It's much better, sir. Yeah.
Okay. So what I was trying to say is that together we have learned a lot of things, and this is the time for us to celebrate in the first place that we have actually done wonders. And if I look at it from the perspective of the CSR evolution in India, this has come a long way in the last 10 years. In the meanwhile, we looking at from the government side, have also looked at we made some certain changes, various circulars had come, various changes were made, various demands were keep on coming. What is CSR, what is CSR not? Of course, I remember the first high-level committee was in 2014-15 itself, and since then to the second high-level committee, 2018, a lot of changes have been incorporated, and this iteration that you see today is
Mukesh sir, I think you've gone on mute.
Mukesh, you've gone on mute. I think you need to come a little closer also, Mukesh. I think every now and then it's going down a little bit.
okay. Is it audible now?
Yeah.
Okay. Somehow this internet thing we cannot have a control on. So
I think just be a little closer would be fine, I guess. That's all.
So what I'm saying is a lot of changes have happened, and in these changes we have learned it together. So what we see today is a collective wisdom of all the stakeholders, those who've been part of the CSR ecosystem. And in these things, in the latest amendments, I would say that there have been few focus areas which are there, and I'm sure the panelists would dwell upon that in a greater detail. But what has changed from the first iteration that we saw in 2014 to now is that this iteration particularly is very inclusive of all the many suggestions of many stakeholders, both from the corporate side, implementing agency side, international organization side, even from the government side. Many government agencies wanted to be a part of it. So all those things have evolved into this. So this is a much better and much more inclusive process was followed while writing this set of rules that we see today. Second one, what changed from the previous one is, I remember in my childhood, there used to be a expectorant called Corex. And this Corex was the, I call it the first iteration was the Corex type of law, where you either comply or explain. From that to now, what has changed is now it has become a CSR obligation. And in government particularly, we pay attention to the wordings which have been used. So now it has become a CSR obligation on the part of the we remember in 2013-14 when we were working on this, we deliberately not gave any.
So monitoring and reporting kind of would be very key for us to associate with you. So having said that, we would want to have.
Excuse me, requesting people to kindly stay on mute. Thank you.
Okay. So second thing which is there is now the CSR has been very clearly defined. It was not very clearly defined earlier. And more importantly, what is not CSR has been very clearly. So that part is also very important for us to know. The more focus on disclosure this time, both by the companies as well as the implementing agencies. The focus that you saw, that demand which was there for decriminalization of the CSR rules, which were agreed upon in the Companies Amendment Act in 2020 itself. So this has been decriminalized now. The focus is also on identify what happened with this CSR money. Some people call it 70 crores, 79 crores, 80 crores. We keep on hearing these numbers all the time. So from there, what has been the impact on the thing? And this is for the first time based on the recommendation of the second high level committee. The impact has found a place in the CSR rules itself. The focus is also on strengthening more of the internal control, both from the corporate side as well as from the implementing agency side. And I'm sure once we discuss it in greater detail, you will come to know. There are also a focus on e-governance. There's registration through e-forms, and also the CSR e-forms have been introduced. The rules, the reporting formats have changed, and some of the reporting formats, e-forms, which was earlier there, AOC4 we used to call it. So from there to CSR1 has been a long journey, and most of it is going to be auto-populated now. So you do not have to find excuses, but the focus is more on giving more exposure. So I'm sure the participants must have gone through the gadget notification related to this. So I would like to stop here, and if there are any questions or clarifications or anything that you like me to point out, I would love to. Thank you.
Thanks, Mukesh sir. It was a little bit of a, still patchy network, but I think we got most of it. And you talked about some very key things on better, stronger disclosure, from all parties. You talked about, the decriminalization going away, part of it. You also talked about, more accountability of what happened to the money. It was not just the input, but it was also the, some of the outcome, part of it, which was also very, very critical for us to now become strongly, focused on. And in many ways, this is also giving people a much more clearer direction from a planning perspective. And I think it's fair to say that, from the governance point of view, we've definitely tried to strengthen, some of the aspects. Nikhil, if I can just request you to come in for a minute here, and more, so that there was a little bit of an audio problem. If you want to just quickly add 1 or 2 points from your side,
Yeah, absolutely, Krishna.
That Mukesh sir was already saying.
Yeah.
So just for the benefit of the audience, so that they get a bit of a view of that. We will come back to you, as Richa soon. But in terms of adding a layer to the conversation that Mukesh sir put out will be very, very useful.
No, absolutely. I think Krishna, am I audible? I hope I'm clearly audible. Yeah. Okay. So I think what Mukesh was saying, and I think you've reinforced in your summary, Krishna, there has been a gradual progression from 2014, the 1st April 2014 CSR rules. And there have been 5 notifications or 5 sets of amendments in between. And this 22nd January one is a very comprehensive one. And high-level committee recommendations have been looked into very well. There is now a clear shift of compliance with impact, one can see. Impact assessment has been, classified as a part of compliance in certain category of projects for certain types of companies with their budgets of 10 crore or more as per a particular set of formulas. Ongoing projects concept has come in, as I can see. What is very clearly evident is a greater focus on governance, accountability, disclosure, and transparency. Now, what is key, I think, as Mukesh was also saying, they have become much more rounded. The NGOs' participation in strengthening the compliance framework will become very relevant now, I feel. The onus was so much more on the corporate so far. And with CSR Form 1 coming in, and if you read the form, the signing authority has to have a resolution from the board that all the information being provided is relevant, and then the professional, the chartered accountant or the concerned finance person who has to certify also has to certify that all of this is not only clear, but the CSR rules have been well understood. So I think this coming in and the data of the implementing partners also converging at the MCA level is a very comprehensive step. And as I'm doing my own NGO work and I work in partnership with a lot of corporates, and I go back, to 2014 when I was also part of the NFCSR where Mukesh is today, I can see that not only the government's participation in this entire process has increased, but now the role of the implementing partner goes up manyfold. The role of the CFO becomes critical. Many people have been asking, is mere allocation or transfer going to be taken as spending or utilization? So some of these things I think which have come in will reinforce what has been happening. And there has been much clarity around, say, as Mukesh said, the definition of CSR, what is not CSR. So some of these things have become very clear, Krishna, and I think as our conversation goes forward, I can see a lot of questions here. These are very typical questions, which are going to be on set-offs, on, overspending or less of spending, where does that money go? So some of that nitty-gritty will come in. But I think overall, I would say, going back to the time when I was also part of it, and now I'm on the implementation side, I'm happy the way this has evolved. I would like to be more accountable as an NGO and strengthen my donor partners, so that we together comply to the ministry and we do better and more impactful CSR. I think that is how I would like to sum it up.
Wonderful, Nikhil. Thanks for that. And, we'll come back to both you and Mukesh with some of the questions that's coming up. I just want to get some opening thought from Pearl. And I think, Pearl, from the corporate's perspective, I think the CSR heads will probably like now that there is more onus on the CFO, the compliance team, the legal team, and more participation from your entire senior management. Everybody has to now watch for CSR. It's not just only going to be the CSR head, which I think is is definitely a positive step. But just want to, get your quick thoughts on how you're looking at, the changes that have happened. And I think a more direct question would be, is this helping us to create more impact, or is it creating more issues on creating more impact? You're on mute, Pearl, sorry.
Sorry about that. So as you know, Krishna, and as many of the friends here know, I wear two hats. So while we are the CSR of the Ambuja Cements, I also run the Ambuja Cement Foundation, which is the implementation arm. And so both of us have to really, I think this was very well said that everybody here needs to do this together. So I think we do welcome anything that has to do with more accountability, not just on the, I think there was always accountability from the point of view of the fact that right from the beginning, the law talked about a set of independent directors, making sure that they knew what was going on. But now you have the sign off from the CFO. So you're right. There would be much more involvement from, the finance and all of that as well. But I think as an implementation partner also, you will have to put your act together in terms of, understanding what corporates that are giving money to you are expecting back, because they have to report back to the MCA. And so that accountability, that governance, the impacts is something that I think we welcome. There are, of course, a few gray areas which are a matter of concern. And sometimes, on the other hand, makes me feel that this is also going to add to a lot more administrative and bureaucratic kind of, work. But we'll come to that as we move along.
Thanks.
Krishna, can I just add one very key punchline? So there are going to be 4 critical players in the whole CSR thing, and I think the NGOs will have to mirror that. The CFO in the company who will allocate the budget basis the formula, the head CSR who will spend the money, the chartered accountant who will audit the accounts, and the company secretary who files the return. Now to reflect this onto the NGO side, I think there they have to really gear up, I feel, because somebody who's the program head must be able to collate and also inform the board on regular basis. So I think the injection of higher level of governance in the civil society organizations is a much needed thing, I feel, which will, this CSR Form 1 will compel, which is going to be good, I feel.
Wonderful. Nikhil, I think that 4 roles that have become more clearer now, I think is an important feedback to, to everyone to kind of take forward. Mukeshji, I think coming to one of the key questions that's coming up and has been coming up, and I can see the chat is one of the most asked questions is, what do we mean by spend going forward? I think that when a CSR says on March 31st, I've spent 10 crores, what should they mean by that? If you can help us now clarify, I think that'll answer probably a lot of the questions for everyone.
Okay. There are 2 sides of this question. One, from as Nikhil was pointing out, there are 4 people, those who have to respond to that. From a CFO perspective, money utilization certificate received from implementing agency would be a CSR spend.
Wonderful.
From a CSR head perspective, the impact which your program has created is whether your CSR is spent or clearly or not. And from a return perspective, which implementing agency, how many, which all places you have spent, all those things will be a part of the company secretary's role to do that. But one important thing which I must emphasize here, we are all looking at from the executive perspective. There's one very important thing, one very important message this law is, these rules are actually trying to bring.
वो क्या बोले कि वो ऐसे rule कुछ नहीं है 2 का. That is what Sunil told.
Sir,
So that there is
Mute yourself, please.
Can you please
salaries in through the foundation.
Mr. CR.
Mr. Iyer,
Alisha, can you please?
I am trying to mute him, sir. Yeah.
Sorry, Mukesh, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that there's one important component which we need to see. We are all seeing it from the executive perspective. That is one important, no doubt about that. But what is important is the ownership of the board, which was not so clearly defined in the earlier set of rules, has been made very, very clear. What is board going to be responsible for? And as I was saying, the board has to take ownership of it now, both in the terms of CSR policy. The approach and direction should be given by the board of that company. It is not the CSR head or CFO or CS or chartered accountant who is going to. Second one is the guiding principle for selection, implementation, monitoring, the direction in which the CSR should go. From a board perspective, to answer your question, the money well spent, according to the guiding principles which is given by the board, would be the CSR act. And related to that would be a formulation of annual action plan. Did you do according to your plan or did you change it in between? So it is not just the executive which are going to be responsible. It is the board which is actually going to be responsible. Not even the ministry is going to be responsible, but the board. And the prominence given to the board of the company in doing this, and the CSR committee of the board in particular, is going to be a very, very important thing to look at, of how board is giving this or steering this entire.
Wonderful. Mukesh, I think very clear message. I'm taking 2-3 of them. One, spend is utilization. I think that should be just put to rest, in terms of asking what is spend anymore. I think it's utilization, clearly. Two, the responsibility of the board now, to help in the policy, the planning, the governance, and the end outcome, seems to be very, very clear and very strong as well. So I think from all of our perspective, in terms of how we plan, and I think Nikhil also said it interestingly, that now that has to be mirrored on the NGO board side, if you were to kind of actually bring the two pieces together. And we'll go on the NGO side in a bit, Nikhil, but I think that was an important
Yeah.
piece of
So in fact, Mukesh's point, I would just like to add to what Mukesh said. The annual action plan, which they have to now kick in before March, if you ask me, 31 for FY 21-22. Let's also talk about that. The more this annual action plan, which is the grant cycle management related thing, synchronizes with the financial cycle, you are more in control of your spends at the end, towards the fourth quarter of, say, FY 21-22. That needs to be understood by those four pillars, as I mentioned: CFO, CSR head, CA, and CS, and get reflected on the NGO side, because till the NGO system understands this, it will not materialize into the spent being utilization certificate related. They will have to work in tandem. Otherwise, it will derail.
Absolutely, Nikhil. Thanks for pointing that out. Pearl, just to get your thoughts in from a more practical point of view as well, both in terms of the definition of spend now shifting to utilization, or being clarified to be more utilization. I think that was, I think, important. And now the role of the board and the conversation around the annual action plan coming in. How does that impact a corporate? I mean, from your perspective, and also if you can, from all your friends in the corporate space, how would that impact everyone?
Yeah, no, personally, I think that this is not as easy and straightforward as Mukesh ji and Nikhil are making it sound. I think that it's not, I mean, so a lot of people, a lot of my friends in the corporates are asking this question, that does it mean that if a corporate has a bunch of NGOs to whom, and even if they are very well governed NGOs to whom money is being given, at the end, I mean, that utilization certificate from that NGO is enough to really say that we have spent the money. As the second issue being that, when you talk about it being the law is now, the rules are now encouraging long-term projects which are well above 1 year and up to 3 years and all of that. But when as an organization you have long-term projects, then how do you give the kind of detailing that planning cycle is asking you to, there is that form which has been put out, which is an extremely detailed form. I mean, to the extent that they want projects, they want which location, they want how much money, they want all kinds of details given. Now, when there's a long-term project, for various reasons, projects can go slower, they can defer, they can, become a part of, an ongoing project for some more time. How do you account for all that at the end of the year? And, what is unspent? So one big question that is being asked about this unspent, because there is now an additional fund that you have to create, right, called the unspent fund, in which you have to put that money within a few weeks of having not spent it, so to speak. So one of the issues that many boardrooms are raising is that for organizations which have not spent the 2%, so if they've not been able to reach 2% on the end of that financial year, then it makes sense to say put that balance amount or whatever into that account. But if somebody has been in any case well above the 2% mark, then if you decided that you wanted to spend the money on X, but you haven't spent it, but you've in any case moved beyond your 2%, how does it matter? Why do we need to put it into a separate amount and block that money? They may choose to use that money in their next cycle as the next year's fund. So why should it be blocked and be shown like that? So, but these are some of the questions that are being asked. And I think this is where a lot of additional bureaucracy and a lot of additional administration is being, thrust upon the corporates through this thing. So while I again repeat, this is not to say that we don't want to be better accountable, or we don't want to disclose more. I think it's a great idea to be more accountable and ask for more disclosures, but one has to be also very practical and not get this bureaucratic. Otherwise it will take away from the spirit of what really needs to be done.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Pearl.
Krishna, can I just respond to Pearl? One point. Pearl, very well said, but couple of points, if the board is made well aware about this dynamics by the briefing system of the corporate, which is very critical if you ask me, there are adequate elbow rooms and leeways available within the rules. If you see one example, let me give you the definition of ongoing projects, and I've got the printout in front of me.
Yeah.
And any project which has not initially been approved as a multi-year project, but whose duration has been extended beyond 1 year by the board based on reasonable justification. So by the time you're hitting, say, March, and maybe you're hitting by January, and you see that you have unspent money lying as part of the 2%, you still have the elbow room to get into the 1+3 format for those projects, And the moment you do that, you have a 4 weeks time within April to the end of April of the coming financial year to put it into the unspent CSR account and have 3 years to spend it. So what the rules are also trying to say, and maybe Mukesh will, because I was also there and I know how the ministry was taking feedback right through the last 7 years, that while there is a check and balance system, the board is the key player. And I think that's where a lot will lie. And while the reporting format has become more exhaustive, I agree with that. But there is also elbow room available. And also they have become more clear in terms of how you can spend the money. Like, for example, directly you can spend, and then there are 4 ways else you can also spend the money. So I think if the board is well briefed, that is going to be a key component. While the elbow room is there, then the other is the impact assessment, Pearl, which is also coming in. So you will have those elbow rooms if you're aware about the options available. Otherwise, you may get stuck. So the government would like to say that we've now had series of discussions, series of feedbacks. Now CSR has evolved so much, 2 high-level committees have happened. So now what is the next level where we want to go? And therefore, they've also brought in the civil society space also to become more accountable at this stage and to help you in your work, if you ask me.
No, the difference, Krishna, between what Nikhil is saying and what I am saying is, I repeat, this is not about elbow room if you have not spent your 2%. I understand that. I'm saying if somebody is planned to spend 3%, but has easily spent 2%, and there is some amount which for some reason they do not want to do, go ahead. Why should they account for that as unspent? It's not unspent. There should be... That
would not be unspent. You have a set off and you have a surplus clause. The clause has come in. There's a surplus clause which carries over, and you can set it off in the next year's budget. A Pearl. If you spend more than 2%, see, this is going to be applicable, and Mukesh, please correct me. If you do not, this would be applicable to the 2% which is mandated as per your eligibility.
It does not say that. It does not say that. And the whole question is, you can't keep certain things gray and keep them saying that, okay, we are not saying that in the law.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's a very good point, Pearl. I think the question of, if there is an, kind of spending above the 2%, what happens? And I think that again, maybe it's being interpreted, differently by different, parties. And I think that may actually, give different people, a different way of responding to it. Mukesh, I don't know if you have a response to that, or is something that we can take and come back later, at this juncture. We're happy to kind of pass it for now.
See, I'll give a little different perspective to this point, particularly of the overspent and overplanned and not spent. When in 2013-14, when this law was being discussed, 2012 onwards, when it was being discussed in greater detail, one of the things which was expected of the sector at that point in time was that they will bring in the business acumen, not just the money. They will bring in business acumen to the social development space as well. So I'm sure the boards, if they have decided that they will be spending 3% or 4% or whatever number of amount of money that they wanted to spend at the beginning of the year, then they must be keeping some assumption in mind, some tools or some mechanisms they must be putting in place to spend that. If that has not happened, as Nikhil very clearly pointed out, if that has not happened, then you have, one is the leeway which Nikhil was talking about, but second important thing is that you can also set it up. That if you want to take it to the next year's money, you can add this up you can carry it forward to the next 3 years, you can do that. So all those possibilities, permutation and combination, the board can make. And you can do it in between the year. You can do it at the end of the year. You can do it whenever your board wants to change it with proper justification. That is all has been written in. So ample scope has been given to the board to decide whatever way in which you want to spend that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mukesh. I think that throws some light on it. And again, I think it goes back to the role of the board here and how the 4 people plus the board have to kind of probably do this planning iteratively as well, and keep reviewing the annual action plan. So it seems to be the case that it's not a one-time plan. We also have to kind of think about it, update it as we as we move forward as well. I think there are a couple of kind of questions that are coming in, so I'm weaving them as we go at this point. In terms of probably on this topic of utilization, if we can just a little bit deeper, Mukesh, and also Nikhil, from your perspective as a as an implementing partner, most of the time, by March 31st, the NGO may or may not have completed their audit, to say how much they've utilized, how much they have spent. So when a corporate asks them saying, hey, what have you spent and exactly what have you utilized by March 31st, what should an NGO, kind of do? What, I mean, are we talking about audited utilization?
Yeah.
Provision? What are we talking about?
Yeah, very good question. Mukesh, can I give a response first? Because this is like right up what we are doing in our own NGO. So I think so the NGOs need to also be very smart. So because 31st March is coming, I may actually make a payment on say 10th of April or 20th of April, but I'll have to book it within 31st March. So typically, suppose I'm paying a consulting fee to a resource person.
Yeah.
I must be able to book it before 31st March and give a 0.75% TDS, which is applicable for FY 2021 because of COVID, and submit my TDS before the 7th of April. And then even if I'm making the payment a little later, I've already made the relevant booking in that concerned financial year. So therefore, the role of the NGOs planning their spending to be able to get the utilization from the chartered accountant is very critical, because the CA will not certify because he's also giving his UDIN number now, which is going to the ICAI. They will be at peril to lose their license if they do not actually see that action on the ground. So it is very critical, Krishna, that the NGOs also understand the entire dynamics of the CSR rules and they work in tandem with the corporate. And I would be very happy, and I would also recommend to both corporates and NGOs that the quarterly discussions where the CFO and the CSR head and the CA or the CS have some kind of a review or whatever to inform the board, somewhere there should be a collaborative engagement between the similar system of the NGO with the donor, because only then they will together arrive at those conclusions. Otherwise, it will hit roadblocks, I feel.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nikhil, for that. Mukesh, anything you want to add on that? And I think there was an additional question I just want to put, along with your response there, saying even on this annual, action plan, does it also for the next year have to be completed and presented to the board by the 31st of March, every year? So there is enough responsibility on this 31st March, both from utilization and planning perspective. So just want to get your thoughts on that, sir.
I'll answer the second question of the utilization certificate first. There are established practices in India. India follows the Ind AS system, and there are established practices within the finance and the accounting world of how to account for this. And there's also a general perspective of, we all know if we have given money as an advance, that cannot be booked as the expense unless we have some kind of utilization certificate, quote unquote, given. So does not mean that you have given the advance and everybody is happy with that. So on the one hand, the corporate also will have to look at whatever money they are spending and whatever the fund flow system that they have put in place for seeing the utilization of that money. That must be monitored very closely, and not just the CFO, but the entire, even the program head, the CSR head, will have a responsibility to ensure that whatever money that they are giving is actually well utilized for this. From the second perspective, from the second question of whether we need to have on day one, if you look at the Companies Act is very, very clearly defined this, that the financial year will start from 1st of April. Now, when do you want to put it up to your board? Before 31st March or after 15th April or within a quarter or so, that is up to you. But whatever the board has to take a decision on, or whatever the board is deciding on how to start, the applicability of those decisions will start from 1st of April.
Got it.
So you need not be doing it on 31st March at 12 o'clock if you know. But you have time, but applicability of whatever you are saying will be applicable for 1st of April.
Very clear, Mukesh. Thanks for that. I think that clarifies for a lot of people who are asking that question. I'm just a little bit switching gears now to another topic where we're getting a lot of questions on this whole discussion of impact assessment. So Pearl, just coming from your perspective, doing impact assessment, I think there are also certain boundary conditions that have been kind of laid out. One, just your own thought on mandating impact assessment, what you as a corporate feel about it, and two, any comments on what kind of boundary conditions have put in there, so that we can also discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, Krishna, I think our corporate welcomes impact assessments as much as I think many corporates do, because a lot of corporates who are genuinely spending and wanting to do good quality CSR are concerned about how is this money really impacting the beneficiary group or whichever group you really want to work for. And so I think impact assessments is per se a very good spin that has been brought into this thing with a focus on. The issue is a couple of them. One is, so who's going to be allowed to do impact assessments? I mean, for example, can any fly-by-night operator come and say, I'm an impact assessor, and now we will see them mushroom. Believe me, when the law came about, we had more than enough people mushrooming to tell us how to build strategy. Now that that is in place, we are going to see a mushrooming of organizations saying that we are impact assessors. So who is going to be that certified impact assessor? Is there any such thought on that? And secondly, the boundary, I would say, is first of all, for organizations which are large and have a large CSR spend, there may be many large ongoing projects which are over 1 crore. So doing that many projects, subjecting every project which is above 1 crore to an impact assessment might become a huge task, because when you're really doing impact assessment seriously, you would also then want to do good baselines. So it will be baselines, impacts, and then, there's going to be a humongous amount of impact assessment that is required to be done. So somewhere even I think that needs to be thought through of whether that cap should be 1 crore or whether it should be more than that. But that's one part of the story. The second part is that on one hand, you want every project of 1 crore and above to be assessed, but you want to put a cap on 50 lakhs. Now, if there are many projects to be assessed by all external impact assessors, you're never going to be able to spend within 50 lakhs. It will land up, each project will cost you 5 to 7 to 10 lakhs of rupees. And if there are 10 projects in the offing, how do you curb that? So this is a boundary that is again going to be a bit of a hiccup in my view.
Got it. I think very valid questions, Pearl. But fundamentally, the focus on impact assessment
is welcome.
Right one. I think we all agree that that's definitely the way to go. In terms of some of the questions around, should it be 1 crore, should it be the 50 lakh cap? I think those are probably interesting operational questions to kind of think about. Mukesh sir, I don't know if you have a response for that, on why those numbers, or do we expect that to evolve over a period of time as well? Since we know the past, maybe you can tell us a little bit of the future as well.
No, I have no comments to offer why 50 lakh or why it shouldn't be 1 crore. But one thing I must say, that this debate about, or this issue of impact assessment has been introduced for the first time. I remember in the past, and where it has evolved from is also, since I'm privy and party to those discussions. Some of these things were emerging, where people were saying at the beginning of this discussion of this in the second high-level committee, is that people were saying that the administrative cost is not enough to capture all. Because earlier it was a part of the administrative cost, whatever you want to do out of it. So the first thing which the ministry has allowed this time to do this is that you should actually start doing this in the first. So even 50 lakh is a good enough amount. If you plan it well, you will be able to do that. I mean, we had done an assessment of 200 odd companies, those who are doing, those who are conducting their activities in tribal and backward regions of India, across India. Across India, we did that study. And within that, the cost was not even 25 to 30 lakh. So I know the consulting companies would come back and say that you are a government organization, so you charge less and all that. That is part of it. But if you plan well, a good impact assessment can be done even that amount. But as I said, I am not justifying that it should be 50 lakhs. The concern which was there, was that if we keep too much money into either administrative head or in the impact assessment, because this is over and above the administrative cost. So if you take 5% there and 5% of there, that makes it 10%. So 90%, the concern which was coming up was that at least 90% of the money should go towards actually implementing the project.
Yeah.
So the spirit behind that was this. But as I said, I do not have any comments to offer why it should be 50 lakhs and should not be 1 crore.
1 crore. No, but I think the spirit was very important to hear, Mukesh, that the idea is to keep the money on the program as much as possible, and make sure that that's effective. Nikhil, probably if you can jump in with the first question of Pearl, because you've also seen the mushrooming happen in 2014-15 as well. You saw a lot of people come in with the thought process of being part of the CSR ecosystem. I think in many ways it was a good thing because the sector grows, with that. So to Pearl's question, on who or what kind of organizations should do, impact assessment, any thoughts there? And since you're also an implementing agency, your thoughts there will be useful. You're on mute, Nikhil. You're on mute, Nikhil.
Am I audible?
Yes, very much.
So Pearl, I think, first of all, when you said about, the mushrooming of the impact evaluators and whatever. So I think again, what the law and the rules have again kind of been very consistent about is the decision. The owners of the money are the shareholders. And so the board of the company will decide, and they should decide, and they should be well informed by the team driven by the head CSR and the technical people under them. So that is a very, very important function, because if you see the attendance of the board members is also now required in the reporting, and also the names of the board members of the NGOs is also required. So a lot of that accountability has come in. So I think that is one very important thing. I think second, Krishna, coming to your query and how this will change is this, that when project proposals are submitted by NGOs, and especially the bigger ones, and I maybe see also, in coming times, see that maybe more impact evaluations may happen. I think those who are giving the money must very carefully evaluate the NGO partners and their capacity to deliver impact as per the funds available, not just to spend it on time, but also to give the results that they are committing. So that will be again a very, very key decider, which we have to keep in mind. We also have to keep in mind, very interestingly, that 12A and 80G have been mentioned for the first time under the CSR rule number 7. And if you see that both types of entities, Section 8, Trust, and 1860, whether company owned or the third party 3-year entities, are required to do this, even though the NGO from the government, like an IICA or an NGO set up by an act of parliament, are not required to do it, while all of them must have CSR 1 submissions. So very interestingly, if you see, the rules are also further reinforcing the charitable nature or the not-for-profit nature of CSR. If you get a 12A, it means you have to comply with sections 11, 12, 13. I can see some questions of people asking about for-profit entities. So they can maybe just come in as technical partners to programs like they do right now. And by putting in 12A and 80G very clearly over here, and the income tax angle therefore comes in, because 12A exemption is given by the Income Tax Department under the Income Tax Act of 1961. So I think all of this is kind of moving towards a regime where greater accountability from both the donor and the NGO, and impact evaluation, moving from compliance to impact, as we are repeatedly saying, Krishna, that that is the movement one can see, and greater focus on result. I also see that I think as more impact evaluation happens, maybe the cost will go down also, because when more of it happens, and again, as Mukesh said, I think Pearl, somewhere strategically, this will have to be thought through, but though even though I agree with what you're saying, 50 lakh might be like a little difficult kind of a ceiling. And somewhere I feel, I think corporate should also write to the ministry asking that if I have so many projects which are more than 1 crore or more, how do I budget it? Do I then take it to the 95% side of it? Because if you see the rule where they are defining admin overhead, they're very clearly saying, but shall not include the expenses directly incurred for designing, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of projects. So somewhere it is also saying to me that I can bill impact evaluation to the 95%. So then my 5% ceiling of 50 lakhs is not a problem then. So I also see some kind of, because it is very clearly saying in rule number 2B, administrative overhead, where it is defining it. It is very clearly saying that means the expenses incurred by the company for general management and admin of CSR functions in the company, but shall not include expenses directly incurred for design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of CSR projects.
So it can't go under that. It can't go under that, no, Nikhil?
No, so the admin expenses is including only general management and administration.
Yeah.
And admin cannot include the others, which will then go to the 95. Obviously.
So it's allowing you five.
Yeah, so it is, therefore somewhere I see a confusion also over here, because somewhere in the rules they are defining an upper cap of 5% of your expenditure and not the budget. It is 5% of the budget expenditure and not the budget. The impact evaluation, what they are permitting. It is not for the budget, about your expenditure. If you see the impact evaluation clause, I will again read that out to you, because it is very important to read the specific words when we are interpreting. It very clearly says, a company undertaking impact assessment may book the expenditure towards CSR for that financial year, which shall not exceed 5% of the total expenditure for that financial year and not the budget. So if your budget is 100 rupees and you spend 90 rupees, your CSR budget is 5% of 90 or 50 lakh rupees, whichever is less. So while they are capping it here, but if you go to the admin expenses definition, it says that your admin expenses is only general management and administration and will not include implementation, design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of CSR projects or programs. So that, where does that money come from? It has to come from the other 95 then.
So I think the Nikhil, the point very, very valid. I think this is going back to the fundamental that there's a lot about interpreting the law.
Yes, absolutely. So I think what goes again, Krishna, is critical is the intent. So when I remember at the IIC, and I'm sure Mukesh will reinforce that, the letter and spirit of the law, what is the intent? So if the intent is very clear to spend, therefore I keep saying, a step ahead of compliance. So even if you are maybe kicking in this year and you have unspent money lying from previous years, if you book it into unspent and bring them into 1+3 formula, there is nothing wrong with it. and you may still have 3 years more. Whereas if you go by exactly the law, maybe it kicks in only for the FY 2021, whatever is unspent, because it kicks in from 22nd January. But if I want to show genuine intent, and if my money was still available from the earlier years, because there is an earlier pronouncement by Mr. Injeti Srinivasan, who was the secretary at that time, that we will give you time till March 2024 to spend any monies which are lying unspent. So that is also there in public domain, whereas it has not been notified anywhere, because the rules kick in now over here. So somewhere I think how we interpret the law, keeping the larger intent of our whole thing in the mind, and therefore the role of the board to have all of this intent also documented well. And then you roll your things out. If that macro level overview is there, Pearl, I think you will also be able to create situations whereby if you also make certain errors inadvertently, you have enough collateral to defend yourself. I think that is how I would like to put it.
Very nice. Sorry, Nikhil, you also, in this whole conversation made one point. I just want to bring that up. I don't know if it got lost, just so that we highlight it. You also mentioned that people who also have corporate foundations, because there's some questions around it, not just the NGO, the corporate foundations also now need to have ATG, AA, and also the registration on the MCA. Is that also required now for everyone?
Yes, absolutely. The rule is very clear. A company established under Section 8 or public trust or registered society, registered under Section 12A and 80G of the IT Act 1961, established by the company singly or along with any other company. That is the first rule, Rule 4A.
Got it.
So for the first time, they are being very, very clear, and I will again, reinforce what Mukesh was saying. They have also talked about direct implementation in the beginning, clause 4.1. The board shall ensure that the CSR activities are undertaken by the company itself or through the following options. Either it is direct or there are following options. Now, in those following options, you have those 3 types of entities, Section 8, 1860 and trust, either owned by the company or by the government or by a third party 3 years old. They all are there. And then you have those by an act of state government or central government. Now, the ones by central or state government are not required to have 12A and ATG, because by very nature, the government money or the government entity which is running on taxpayers' money is charitable in nature. It is not a for-profit. Government work is not for-profit work typically. So I think that is where those differentiations are also coming in some way. So when an IICA does it, for example, where Mukesh is, an IICA falls into the bracket of Rule 4, clause number B. A company established under Section 8 of the Act or a registered trust or a registered society, and IICA is a registered society established by the central government or state government. So an IICA is established by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Is that right, Mukesh? I think, and therefore this rule very clearly mentions that as per this rule, if I go, an IICA is not required to have a 12A or ATG, but an IICA does have it. As I know that it has that.
Got it. Very useful, Nikhil, because this was another question that was coming up quite deeply. Mukesh, there was one question on the next level of detail on the annual action plan. Is this an internal document to the company? Does it have to be disclosed in any public domain? What is the guidance on the annual action plan per se?
Annual action plan is a part of the CSR policy this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the CSR policy has to be uploaded in the public domain on your website. So it cannot be an internal document of that. Very intense. And I remember we were having a discussion with Dr. Chatterjee in 2014 on that. And he was very, very clear that this has to be a part of the public disclosure. And since it was not very clearly defined in the rules at that point in time, many companies have actually not put it in. And I do not, but this time the rules are very clear on this. And the rules have to be applied and complied with. So it is not an internal document. That is for the public to see how many projects you are doing, what kind of projects you are doing, where you are doing, what kind of projects. So this is where I was saying that the annual action plan has to be there and it has to be a part of the CSR policy.
Wonderful. Pearl, from your perspective, have you put some, thoughts already, I'm sure, on, what would you like to put in this annual action plan? If there's going to be a public document, what all would you as a corporate would prefer to put, in this plan, which can benefit the ecosystem, who's potentially going to partner with you? How would you approach it, and what would your guidance to other corporates be I think that's another set of questions that's coming up saying, what should I put in this annual action plan?
I don't actually, this won't apply hugely to us, Krishna, because, for us, it is the Ambuja Foundation, our own foundation, which does all our implementation. And we are, like I earlier said, well above the 2% mark anyway. So for us, our plan of what is getting planned for the year has already come bottoms up. And, so what we will put out is what we intend to do. Now the only discussion would be to look at how much of what we put out in this annual actual plan will then be treated as unspent if it's well over 2% and we've still not spent it. So we're still in the process of understanding how to put it out. I won't be able to answer that clearly, but which also means that if this is a part of the policy, then policy will also need to be updated every year, because it's an annual actual plan. So, normally you don't have a policy updated every year, but you do review it, but now it will have to be an updated policy with the annual action plan year in and year out.
Got it. Nikhil, any guidance you have on what to put in the annual action plan?
So Mukesh, very important. Sorry, Krishna, very important. If you see the law clause number 3, where it defines the CSR committee's role, monitor the CSR policy of the company from time to time. And they need to have a very transparent monitoring mechanism at the board level. The rules have now defined it. It was very ambiguous, Now they have defined it very clearly. And if you see the clear points which are mentioned in the annual action plan, you have to be very specific in terms of the list of projects or programs, their manner of execution, the modalities of utilization of funds. So the modalities of utilization of funds is a very key one. It is all discussion that we are doing about spent, unspent, UC utilization certificate. It is now linked with the board level situation here. And to certify this, the CFO becomes the key person now, if you ask me. The role of the CFO to periodically, every 2-3 months, be in touch with the system, and this system be in touch with the NGO corresponding system is the key, if you ask me. Otherwise, it will fail. It is a sure recipe for failure. This has to be understood by the key people very, very quickly.
Wonderful.
But Krishna, to just go back to what you asked me, I don't think it's going to be a great choice of the corporate of what they want to put in. I mean, it's all prescribed. It's actually quite prescriptive. If you look at that annual action plan format that has been given, there are a huge amount of details for every project that you need to put in. So the concern, and I want to make one disclosure here that, as I've been speaking, this is not only about me. This is I'm representing a lot of other organizations which do things differently from the way we do it. And let me tell you that there are some very well-meaning, good organizations which have spent a good amount of money on CSR, but they may have like 100 different partners. And for them to, go through this prescriptive format of putting in every project, location, spend, method of spending is going to be a huge administrative task. And I repeat that, and I think this is going to come out as we move on, Nikhil. The fact remains that it's sounding all very easy when you make it sound, but it is going to be a humongous administrative and bureaucracy.
And let me add to that, Nikhil. Before you respond, I want to add to one question. I want to bring up a practical problem that we're facing, which I think will be great to get your thoughts. From the NGO perspective. Recently, we went around asking a bunch of NGOs, and I think some of our CSR customers have done as well, saying, "Hey, did you read the new amendments? Do you know what to do?" And most of them didn't know that there was a registration number for them to kind of go get now, right? That knowledge itself was missing because there were smaller NGOs, or didn't have that view. And two, if at all I had a portfolio, let's say, of few large programs, but many small programs as well. So with the governance role becoming, stronger, the CFO's choice now to do smaller programs, if the CFO has a say, the interest level may be slightly lower, to say, hey, let's give 1 lakh to 100 people. Instead, he may say, just do 10 projects with 10 crores each. It's too much to do, in that form.
Yeah.
Not bad. But that may take away from the freedom of, where you want to deploy, how you deploy, because now in some sense, the operational challenge from that perspective is higher. So just want to get your thoughts on,
So I think very valid, and Pearl, I'm fully in alignment with what you're saying. All I will say is this, that I think you need to be helped much more by your NGO partners now as compared to earlier, because I'm an NGO, I know it. And with my team, when I'm working, I am so hell-bent on documentation of my vouchers and receipts and my reporting on time. Your demand on your NGO partner has to go many times more, because you are the ones who have to now first report, while they are just giving their data in CSR form 1. It becomes very, very important, I think. And I think, Krishna, to answer your question, yes, that can be a challenge. But I think that is where I think the use of technology as a horizontal enabler will need to come in more for monitoring tools, etc. Because if I have a good, robust technology as a horizontal, both at the board level, macro level monitoring of the rollout of the CSR process, and that is for the 95% more at the implementation monitoring level. And then there is a convergence of the two. Somewhere that technology has to come in, I think, in a good way. If my CFO and my team wants to do smaller projects and also give a chance to smaller NGOs, otherwise managing them and then to be doing all of that will be almost next to impossible, as Pearl is saying. So I think, Pearl, the capacity building of the NGOs, when we are doing their capacity building on, say, education, on skill building, those are vertical, threads on the Schedule 7. Maybe in this horizontal management process of the entire compliance framework, where NGOs so far were more just saying that I want to do business development, I want more funds, but their accountability towards utilization and spending this fund on time with impact, I think that gets into it in a much bigger way, if you ask me. And that is the only way by which you will, I think, come anywhere close to achieving the compliance standard that the government is wanting, I guess.
Yeah. So basically, if we want to kind of, if we believe there's governance is better, and this is going to help us get better governance, then it looks like we all have a lot of extra work to do as well along the way.
And Krishna, let me tell you, the NGOs, as I travel around the country interacting with many of them are even ignorant about the original 2014 rules and the section 135. And I keep asking them, you want to do better primary education for children, first educate yourself about the framework under which you are working. You can't just, so somewhere, and there are very, very outstanding ones also, as Pearl has said, some outstanding organizations who are very strong in understanding and, supporting the corporate.
Absolutely.
Krishna, I also want to bring a small, bring your notice to the fact that, when we're talking about capacity building of NGOs, in the earlier rules, in fact, there was a clause which allowed for that. They allowed you to spend a certain amount of money to actually build capability. Now, this clause, I think it was number 6. I think it's been deleted from the new rule. So, in fact, I have been part of some of the NGO discussions also, where, this is actually becoming so now the corporates will not be able to show that capacity building as a part of their CSR. It has been actually deleted, this rule. So,
but Pearl, it can now go into the 95. If you see the 95 part of it, if you ask me, I will look at it from the other side as well. So I will say, while they have removed it from there, it opens up a new vista in the other side also. So if you see, including, it says very clearly, expenses directly incurred. In fact, even for designing the projects, you can bill into 95 now. Earlier, designing was part of 5 as part of admin overhead. You can now design implementation. Now, when you are implementing, you can very well justify capacity building to strengthen your implementation if I have to achieve impact for which I have to comply. So I have added. So this is what I'm saying. How you interpret it, and if your intent is in the right place, you will need to create the right kind of note sheets, as we call them, the green sheets in government, or whatever is your utilization or your justification within your system, where you say that my NGO needs this capacity building and I would like to do it as a project within the 95. Because now that cap has been removed, if you ask me, from the other side, if I put it that way.
Interesting. And I think it keeps going back to that fundamental point of interpret and also intent. What is your intent and how are you interpreting the law? Seems to be a core of the starting of everything. Mukesh, one question that's coming up also is, what is the definition of this thing called now the ongoing project? How should one define? And there's a 1+3 kind of a definition as well. Can that be extended? What are the boundaries there? It'll be great to hear your views on that, sir.
Ongoing projects are the ones which are, as the name says, are ongoing as a part of your specification. And this 1+3 clause which has been done is specifically point of view of suppose, and this has a perspective of the COVID and other related disturbances which had come planning cycle this year, particularly this year and the last year. So ongoing projects, suppose somebody has designed it in the month of, say, September or October for spending it by March. And by various reasons, they are not able to spend that. So excluding this year, they can spend it till the next 3 years. So the board will have to give this justification. And board will say that, okay, we were not able to spend it. That will not be treated as unspent amount. That will be treated as a part of your ongoing project. And ongoing project can be extended by the board depending on the reasonable justification.
So, Krishna, can I add one thing over here? And specifically, Pearl, you will have to keep this thing very much in mind, because I think you are heading the CSR of a corporate and you're also heading the foundation, which is an implementing arm, right? So for you, and a lot of leeway, as I can see, are there in the rules at the board level to give you those things. So your briefing note to the board every quarter becomes a key document, one pager, if you ask me. And the way you present those requirements in pressy writing with clear backsheet worksheets available at your office, and the kind of team that you have that advises you on the horizontal, the CFO on this side and the CS and the CA on the other side parallel to you, because that leads to the CSR committee of the board. So that briefing note with all the requirements and the justification, maybe in one line with the relevant backend worksheets, will be very relevant for you to get all that you need to be able to be in a safe area where you can work freely with great innovation and with compliance totally under your control. And in some places, I always try and tell corporates as well as NGOs, take a step also ahead of compliance. Don't just do it because it is part of compliance, because when you do that extra effort, you are creating and you are documenting your higher level of intent, which covers up for you for some inadvertent lapses that are bound to happen when you are into operation, and you may make some wrong interpretations. If your intent is well documented and you have a good fixed deposit of good intent documented, when any query comes in from the ROC or from the income tax, see, the income tax scrutinies also happen. So in your income tax returns, because there is a clear divergence I've seen, because TDS issues will come in. There's a donor query which is who's reporting to MCA. So somewhere I am also seeing a regime, Krishna, here where I was seeing a great disconnect between the MCA and the income tax department. Now that 12A and ATG are finding some space in the rules, it may have some convergence between the two as well. And with the NGOs also now filling up the CSR Form 1, and if you see the FCRA amendment with all getting converged at SBI, Parliament Street branch, etc., I can see that there will be greater tally of spend and utilization in the coming days and months and years, where the NGOs may also be asked to report. Maybe, I don't know if it happens, but I will not be surprised. In 2 years, I'm also required to submit under CSR Form 1 what was my project-wise spending, with my CA's UDIN numbers confirmed to tally with what the MCA 21 reporting in AOC form number 4 is being happening from the company secretary side.
Absolutely. So I think, very, very important, to understand this ongoing project very clearly. And I think there was a couple of questions also on who calls the project ongoing. And I'm assuming it comes back to the board and the CSR committee, like everything else, it has to be the board and the CSR committee. Nobody else can declare a project, kind of ongoing from that perspective. We're almost coming, towards the end. We have the last few minutes, of the discussion. Obviously, this is a very interesting time in discussion for us. We've got some very good notes from Mukesh that he's already put up, in different places. At SATVA, we've put out some notes with support from some of our partners. So we will be sharing clarifications. Plus, we will also create, keep this channel more open, through SATVA as well, so that we can continue to answer queries, and more FAQs we will put up. So, don't stop the questions from coming in.
Krishna, can I respond to one of those which I am seeing, or you have something else?
I have 2 questions for you, Nikhil.
Okay.
There was one question that I wanted to bring up, because there was an ask saying, does the NGO, need to have a 5%?
Yeah, I was about to answer to that same question by Deepak Gujarati, I think is the person.
People who asked that question. One. The second point, Nikhil, if you can just quickly close on saying, from the NGO's perspective, we've talked a lot from the corporate perspective, from what the law is saying, but what are the top 3-4 things the NGO should do now, to be prepared to comply,
absolutely. So I'll first answer the second question, Krishna. To be having hard copies of the rules and the laws in front of them always. Please, I have my notes also. I keep hard copies. Don't just do the e-reading of it. Read the lines and in between the lines and make your notes. I will just give you a small picture of my notes. So please do that, because you need to be very well informed and very well read. Give your donor the confidence that if you give me funds, I will help you comply. Use compliance knowledge as also your capacity to raise resources for yourself, and not just your capability to do better education project or skill building project. I think the key on fundraising, if you ask me, is your confidence giving to the donor also, that I will not only give you impact, but 100% compliance, and maybe a step ahead of that. That is a key requirement. Now, to be able to do that, you have to have your own governance under control and your board. Typically, managing the board of an NGO is not easy. And there are people spread around. There are some very elderly people who are not tech savvy. So keeping them informed by various ways and means, so that when those resolutions come in, you have to have signed a lot of resolutions to open a new SBI account in FCRA Parliament Street, for example. And an old board member will say, I have no idea what's happening. Why should I sign? Then you are gone. So you have to be sharing information at your board level at a regular, have your governing board meetings quarterly, like the corporates have, if you ask me. So as we keep saying, corporatization of the NGOs and NGOization of the corporates. So the corporatization of the NGOs is a key requirement, if you ask me, again at a macro level. And to do that, they must get into understanding these nuances. If they may be very good in a particular sector, they will not get funds if they are not understanding the rules of the game and how they are changing. Next is the aspect of documentation. They are very weak on documentation, Krishna. They have to be very, very strong on their documentation, and their entire team should be adept at it, so that if a query comes from the donor, the program head need not answer it. The paper should be able to answer. Anyone who has that paper or that file, they should be trained by the program leads to answer to the queries of the donor or to the income tax people. You should train your teams to be able to handle all of it, and not just do work for the beneficiaries. Coming to the 5%, no, that cap is not for the 95 thing for projects, but typically corporates want to cap it themselves, and it is the freedom of the corporate. And if you ask me, it generally ranges between 5 to 7 to 8%. I think you have to again justify suppose it's a capital expensive, capex expenditure based project. Maybe there could be something different or whatever. So I think it's something which has to be worked out by the NGO and the corporate, but not part of the larger compliance framework, because now they have clearly defined administrative overhead. So please read. NGOs are not reading. I'm telling you, I'm an NGO. I've gone back to my work at the ground, and I'm interacting with so many of them. They are not reading, and they say, give me funds. I can do it very well. So I think the NGOs have to really gear up, and as Pearl said, be very strong co-partners with their CSR donors who have tested them, who want to work with them, because their teams at level of Pearl, etc., will need that support. If you ask me, they need that support, and also the confidence.
Thanks.
So these would be my words for the NGOs, Krishna.
Thanks a lot, Nikhil. Well, on a closing note, what would be your key message to your fellow corporates? What would be the key message to NGOs in the ecosystem, and any key message to the ministry?
I would think that I would again say what I began with, that I think we need to look at this in the right spirit, that this is going to elevate the whole condition of the way we do CSR, whether it's governance, whether it's impact. Our money will be well spent if we understand this well. But I would also say that there are these issues that are gray areas, or where we think that there needs a little bit of further clarification or even a rethink. And I think those need to be well represented as a group, keeping the spirit of what is required by the law in mind. And I think that this is work in progress. I don't see this as one notification which has come, which is going to just have everybody fall in line exactly and deliver. I think we will have to work together, whether it's with the government, with the NGOs and the corporates, your NGO partners, to make sure that we put out the right impacts and really make the CSR law something that we are proud of in this country. But I think that we need to take this together to whichever office we need to take it to. And I think corporates will have to come together with reasonable, thinking of what they want to take forward, and ask for a reconsideration or lobby around.
Absolutely. No, very,
Krishna,
very,
Krishna, I just want to answer one CSR form. One query has been asked by many people. I think what they need to do is, because that form is not yet out, I think I had discussed this with Mukesh also. I think he's also engaging on that front. What the NGOs should do, and maybe the corporate foundation and every entity who has to do CSR, is to get the board resolution ready, which defines that the rules have been well read and who that signing authority is. That is very clearly mentioned in the CSR Form 1 if you read. So you keep that board resolution ready. You please make sure that this form is completely filled up and you have your chartered accountant fully on board and well informed. Keep your chartered accountant well informed over the next couple of weeks. Now, if the form comes in March, as Mukesh told me, it will not take more than an hour to upload. And I've requested him also to talk to the MC that can it come out the earlier, the better. Because otherwise, when you hit 1st of April, what happens to the renewal of the project or any new project? Because CSR registration number is now mandatory as of 1st of April. So in such a situation, my advice to everybody would be to be prepared. Wherever compliance is required and you have a clear indication, don't just wait for it to be released. You be ready with your document. Again, documentation. So if you have documentation under control, you are well prepared for compliances. Whether it is today or it will happen 10 days later.
and being prepared is very critical.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Your final words, in terms of what you want as the key message to the corporates especially, and anything to the NGOs as well.
Two things. As Paul was saying, that this is not the final word on CSR implementation in the country. We have seen a lot of changes which have come in the last 5 years. And if there are some gray areas or whatever we call it at this moment, we will certainly try to get them on board and get the clarification. But having said that, what is important for us to know is that the CSR law is going to stay. That is the first message. And the ownership has to be taken by the board. That is also very clearly written. The board may or may need some support from consulting organizations like SATPA, or maybe from somebody else to read through this process. And our experience has been that the boards in India are really, really strong case execution. And some of them may look at it as a administrative, a little bit more of bureaucracy here. But overall, they have been dealing with a much larger issue and much larger. This is only the 2% of their profit. They deal with the 100% of their actual investment from the company. So they're very well capable people and well read and very well meaning people. And India has demonstrated this. One important message which I want to the entire ecosystem to be pondering over is that whenever we decide to do anything related to CSR, we need to be keeping the person whom our CSR projects are going to impact on. If we keep the interest of that person in mind, and then devise our strategy, the CSR strategy or CSR project or even implementation or whatever thing that we want to do on that. That would be the real good thing which we will do to this entire cause of CSR. Because we can fight among ourselves, this is right, 50 lakh is less, or 5% is more, or whatever is that thing, that we can fight it out ourselves, and there are enough rooms and enough platforms available where we can discuss this out and take this to a logical conclusion. But that's not the end of CSR. End of CSR will come. The purpose of CSR will be achieved if we see that the person whom it is going to be affected, our actions, our CSR projects are going to be affected. If that person is happy at the end, we'll be more than happy to take any kind of burdens or any kind of support or kind of suggestions which is coming from any quarter within the ecosystem. We'd love to take it forward.
Thanks a lot,
Krishna.
Mukesh sir. I think it's definitely a right,
Which is
kind of message to kind of end the discussion on that. At the end of the day, we are all here for impact, and that's the central. Compliance is a way to get there, but the real purpose of having the CSR, work that we all do and the impact work that we all do is to really get the outcomes on the ground and to make a difference completely on the ground. And that's definitely, it's going to be the most important aspect of all our planning, all our, execution and governance focus. I really, really want to thank Pearl for bringing in the practical challenges. While it's definitely in some sense clarifying and simplifying a few things, but getting it done on the ground will require a lot of strings to be pulled together and holding it all. I think we will go through those initial challenges both at the corporate and the NGO side to get it right. But hopefully we will, do soon, and we can take some of those consolidated inputs back to the ministry, as some feedback and get certain things discussed and resolved if required. But very, very important, Pearl, to have your thoughts. And Nikhil, to see your passion, for this. I will give you your last one for sure. But thanks for bringing in that focus on intent is the most important thing in CSR. Interpretation is the next important thing in CSR. Preparation and being prepared is then, underlying everything. And if you're not prepared, then we may find ourselves in a bit of a trouble. Last 30 seconds, Nikhil, and then we close.
So just Krishna, just wanted to say, because you remember when I was also at ISA, Mukesh was there at that time, and you were one of those many organizations which came, and now you are also in the ecosystem as many of us are. I think the role of organizations like Sattva and many more who are there in this ecosystem, who are doing genuine good work, becomes paramount, because corporates like, which Pearl is representing, or the ministry institution like Mukesh is representing, some can create framework, some can, do grant, etc. But enabling the ecosystem, strengthening the players, and then together, as Paul said, right, collaborate to achieve the overall impact of what is the impact of a project and what is the impact of a legislation. The legislation there needs to be an impact evaluation at some point in time. So I think that is a very key, enabling role that such institutions would also need to play. Krishna, I just wanted to mention that.
No, absolutely. Thanks for that. And I think, like I said, all of us have a lot of work to do. And, going back to the first few words of Pearl, that, we have to do this together. So,
Yeah.
But a big shout out and thanks, Pearl, Nikhil, Mukesh, everyone, and to my Sattva team who helped in putting these pieces together. Thanks so much. And for all the wonderful participants and their questions. We had over 340 people log in today, and many more who registered. Will get the recording of this. Plus, like I said, this is an ongoing conversation, so please write to us. We will try and get the answers back to you as quickly as possible. We will keep this channel open at Sattva, for the many more days to come. And if required, we will also request inputs from Pearl, Nikhil, and Mukesh as and when required. But we will keep the channel open. A big thanks to all of you once again, and have a good evening, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for having me here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody, and have a very good evening.